And you also told me that you already have some experience with Kotlin Multiplatform, but no experience with Flutter yet. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how do you like Kotlin Multiplatform, how it worked out for you, if there were any problems you ran into, and even though you haven't used Flutter yet, what do you think about these cross-platform solutions in general? Because people are often worried that cross-platform like Flutter will make native obsolete. Do you think this is a worry that's justified?
So here's an important thought to me that came to me a couple of years ago. I was listening to, I think, Elon Musk on Joe Rogan or something like that, and he said something which I think it had to do with Neuralink, which made me realize, in my opinion, exactly what is stopping the floodgate of cross-platform development, the technical limitation. And so this might be a useful thing to mention for people who are wondering if they need to jump into cross-platform development. So in my opinion, where the floodgate will open is when satellite internet probably, is fast enough that the time it takes for me to press a button on my device and for that to be handled by the CPU is comparable for the time it takes for me to press a button to, it'd still be handled by the CPU, but instead of it being handled by the application on this phone, it's sent through the internet to a cloud application. So for those who are wondering, the cloud means someone else's computer. There's no cloud. So anyways, that time delay and the freedom of access to internet that fast and latency that low, in my opinion, will dictate the transition between when these things will basically just become view renderers and all the rest of the application will be hosted on a server, for example. So I think that's why. So A, we don't have that yet. Most of us, certainly not the majority of users, in my opinion. And that's why native is still flourishing and developing. And it actually pisses me off when people say things like Android is dead. It's like 4 billion users is dead. Like, what a dumb statement that is. Sorry, I'm getting angry. So returning to the question, I think that's the limitation and why I've been interested in looking at something either cross-platform or something that is primarily dealt with through the browser, which potentially includes things like React. Why I've been interested in that is I do think native does kind of have a shelf life based on what I just said there. I think once we have really low latency internet that's freely accessible for the majority of mobile users, it just simply won't make sense to have a lot of the stuff that we have on here. Now, talking about Kmm and Flutter. So my own experience with Kmm, I've built an application which has an Android front end with Compose, and it is a Kmm project. I'm planning to add in a JavaScript, so a Kotlin JS front end and a Compose desktop front end at the moment. So I don't have a ton of implementation experience on my own projects. I have been doing code review with a friend of mine who's building a Kotlin Multiplatform mobile project, which also includes machine learning, which is really cool. So I have a little bit of experience with it. What I see so far in my initial experiences are that I'm very, very excited because I think my approach of being very lean on third-party libraries is actually going to make it so that a lot more of my code base is reusable across multiple different front ends. So for example, I think I can share hopefully both my presentation logic classes and my view models and possibly even the composables across different modules. So I'm very, very excited about it. Here's the problem. Configuring Gradle for a Kotlin multi-platform module has been a nightmare both in my project and in this other project I was working on. I contributed this one little change where I basically pulled the compose theme into a common module. And it took me like 16 hours to get that to work, even though I only changed like a line of code and just copied some files from one module, Gradle module, I should say, into another Gradle module. It took me like 16 hours just to get the Gradle to build. So the biggest limitation I see at the moment for Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile is Gradle configuration. Maybe part of that is there's just not good up-to-date examples, but that was a complete nightmare. I'm very excited about it though, because like I say, Kotlin is my favorite programming language. And I think with my sort of third-party third-party library lean approach to building applications, I think that'll translate really well. People ask me a lot about Kotlin Multiplatform versus Flutter versus React. And my limited experience with most of these things is that they share something common, which is that they'll work pretty well for most use cases across the multiple platforms. And then when they need to interact with like the device at a lower level, they tend to be really, really obnoxious. So I think you should understand that, or people should understand that generally speaking, a multi-platform solution is going to come with benefits and trade-offs essentially. So the benefits hopefully are shared code across multiple different code bases. Even just being able to write in the same language might be useful to you. But the deficits are that you're generally speaking going to lose some fine-grained control and access to the libraries on the native device, for example. So that's kind of my general thoughts. I really don't agree and don't think that native is dead. And I think if you want to start learning Android now, whether it's with Flutter or with Kotlin or whatever, I think that's a great way to do it. Or I think it's still a very valid career path. And there's people who make videos about this kind of thing, that Kotlin is, or native is dead, and then their followers regurgitate that, and then I get angry at them. But there's still a lot of jobs out there for Android developers, even in Java, because there's a lot of legacy code bases. So for that kind of thing, for someone listening to this, go with what interests you and don't worry too much about whether it's going to be obsolete, because the skills you're going to pick up in learning Flutter or learning Kotlin Android or even Kotlin Java, those are going to translate into other fields of programming.
Yeah, I agree. When you learn one of these platforms, then you can just switch to another one later if it really becomes obsolete, which for native Android will most likely not be the case very soon. Just to quickly explain the difference between Kotlin Multiplatform and Flutter, if some people don't know, it's not quite the same. Flutter is a real cross-platform framework where you basically build one app and it works on iOS and Android. And the downside of this is that it's not very close to the metal, right? You have to, you get problems as soon as you need more low-level stuff, like, I don't know, Bluetooth or media player or stuff like that. On Flutter, I think you need plugins for that. I have no first-person experience with Flutter yet, because I haven't tried it out yet, just because didn't really have the time, didn't really interest me. But Kotlin Multiplatform is a bit different. There you share code between iOS and Android, but then you also have specific platform-specific code. So you have to actually get a Mac and Xcode and write iOS-specific UI code. And the same for Android with Android Studio. And you just have the core part in the middle. Basically, there's shared logic that both platforms use. And what you save is you don't have to write this shared logic twice. But I think the benefit of KMM is that you are still very close to the platform. So you can do all the stuff you can do in a native app, I think, because you write this Android and iOS specific code. So this is a bit of the difference between Flutter and KMM. For me personally, I find KMM more interesting at the moment. But if I would try to build a real app that doesn't need any of these low-level features, that's basically just an app that handles some database operations and needs to look nice, then I would, and it was important for me that this app is a financial success. or no, this is the wrong way to phrase it. I don't want to say that Flutter makes your app a financial success. I just mean that it's a real product that I want to get out there as quickly as possible. And it's a simple app, then I would probably try out Flutter for that. But for anything that's more, for anything that's more complicated, I find KMM more interesting. And you said that it's a bit painful to set up with Gradle, but I think they will streamline this more in the future, won't they? So
I do think so.
Yeah. So just as we can start a project in Android Studio and it just works, I think it will also be easier in the future when you start a new KMM project, because there are templates for that in IntelliJ, right?
Yes.
For KMM.
As some precedents there, so a great example is I was very late in adopting Gradle KTS, which is being able to write Kotlin instead of Groovy in Gradle. And the reason why I was late in adopting it was because the people who I was familiar with who were using it said it was super annoying and buggy. The one thing that wasn't an issue at all for me in this latest project that I was working on was Gradle KTS. They had ironed out all the kinks there. It was like the plugins and stuff like that that were really annoying to configure. So I do think they'll streamline it quite a lot.